Jack Newton survived everything the game of golf could throw at him. He survived the toughest courses on earth, the pressure of major playoffs, and the relentless grind of competing against the finest players of his generation. He walked off every course still standing, but on a rain-soaked night at Sydney Airport, none of that survival instinct could save him. It was not a rival, not a wayward iron, not a missed putt that ended his playing career. It was a single step in the wrong direction. This is the story of how one of Australia's greatest golfers lost everything, not on a fairway, but on a dark runway, in the time it takes to blink. Jack Newton was not supposed to come from where he came from. Cessnock is a coal mining town in New South Wales, the kind of place built on calloused hands and Monday mornings that smell of dust and diesel. It produced miners, factory workers, and rugby league players. It did not produce world-class golfers. Jack's father embodied that world entirely, a rugby league man, hard-edged and competitive, who passed his fire down to his son in full. But there was one quiet exception in the Newton household. His mother played golf. Nothing serious, nothing professional, just enough to press a club into young Jack's hands and let him feel what the game was like. That was all it took. Jack grew up playing everything his town had to offer: rugby, soccer, cricket, but golf was the one that kept calling him back. When the family eventually relocated to Epping on the outskirts of Sydney, he kept playing, kept improving, kept pushing himself towards something he could feel but not yet name. He was right to believe in himself. He just had no idea yet how far that belief would carry him, or how suddenly and violently it would be extinguished. By the late 1960s, there was a new name circulating through Australian golf: Jack Newton. He was young, powerfully built, and naturally gifted in the way that only a handful of players in any generation truly are. Those who watched him said he had everything: the swing, the instinct, the mental composure that separates good players from great ones. He was spoken of as the man who would carry the flag after legends like Peter Thompson and Kel Nagle. In 1969, after falling in the semifinals of the Australian Amateur Championship, Newton turned professional and headed to Europe, because that was what ambitious young Australians did in those years. The European Tour was where reputations were forged, and Newton forged his quickly. In 1972, at just 22 years old, he won the Dutch Open. Then, the very next week, he won the Benson and Hedges Festival, back-to-back titles. The golf world sat up and paid attention. Off the course, he and his fellow Australian pros, Bob Shearer, Ian Stanley, Stuart Ginn, became as well known for their company as their golf. They played world-class golf by day and, by Newton's own cheerful admission, closed down the clubhouse bar long after everyone else had gone to bed. He would later reflect with characteristic bluntness, "We had more fun." It's all about the money now. There was a freedom to that era of the sport that would not survive much longer. No fitness coaches, no media handlers, no carefully curated public image. Just talented men playing the game they loved, hard and without apology. Even a humbling lesson from the game's greatest couldn't dull Newton's confidence. After winning money from Tom Weiskopf in an exhibition in Australia, word reached Jack Nicklaus. The Bear arranged a quiet reminder of where the power truly resided. Nicklaus shot 65, Weiskopf shot 64. Newton fired 67 and still lost $300. He later claimed he had overheard Nicklaus tell Weiskopf beforehand, "Let's teach this young fellow a thing or two." But afterward, knowing the young Australian could scarcely afford the loss, Nicklaus quietly settled for nothing more than a sandwich and a drink and let the money go. It was the kind of story that captured Newton perfectly: fearless enough to take on anyone, good enough to belong in the room, and impossible not to like. If there was a single moment that announced Jack Newton to the world, it arrived on a rain-soaked Sunday afternoon on the coast of Scotland. The 1975 British Open at Carnoustie had been shaping up as Bobby Cole's tournament. The South African had led after 3 rounds on the back of consecutive 66s. But wind at Carnoustie is a different kind of adversary, and the final day brought plenty of it. Cole collapsed. When the wreckage was cleared, two men were left standing at 9 under par, Tom Watson and Jack Newton. Newton had not stumbled into this position. He had earned it. In the third round, he had fired a 65, breaking the course record. He arrived at the playoff not as a grateful survivor, but as a genuine threat. The 1-8-hole Sunday playoff was contested in steady rain. Newton actually led after 12 holes. Then Watson chipped in for eagle at the 14th to retake the advantage. They arrived at the final hole level. Watson found the green in 2. Newton's approach found the bunker. He blasted to around 18 feet. Watson completed the hole in 2 for par. Then Newton stood over his ball 1 putt to force sudden death. The ball curled toward the left edge of the cup and stopped just outside it. A miss by inches. Watson won, 71-72. What most people do not know is that this was the last 1-8-hole playoff in British Open history. From 1985 onward, the format was changed to a 4-hole aggregate. That Sunday at Carnoustie was a one-time moment in the history of the game, and Newton came within a ball's width of owning it. 5 years on, Newton stood in contention again, this time at Augusta National. The man in front was Seve Ballesteros, and Seve had been almost untouchable all week. He entered the final round with a 7-shot lead, the tournament seemingly long decided before Sunday had even begun. By the time he reached the 10th hole, that lead had stretched to 10 shots. By every reasonable measure, the Masters was over. Golf has never cared much for reasonable measures. Newton began making his move. 3 birdies in 3 consecutive holes. The gap was suddenly closing. Meanwhile, Seve was unraveling around Augusta's treacherous back 9, dropping 4 shots in 4 holes. In the end, Seve steadied himself and held on, winning by 4 shots. Newton finished tied for second. Another major, another near miss, another performance that confirmed he could compete with anyone on the planet when the stakes were highest. Seve, who respected Newton deeply, had a nickname for him, Yak. Newton himself never made excuses. He said simply, "I wouldn't put myself in the Nicklaus class, but I always felt that if I came into a major with some good form, I could be dangerous." He was right. He always had been. By 1983, Newton had assembled 13 professional titles across 4 tours, a PGA Tour victory at the Buick Open in 1978, the Australian Open in 1979, the Australian Order of Merit that same year, and 2 major runner-up finishes that confirmed he was not merely a good golfer, but a great one. He was 33 years old. In golf, that is not old. That is prime. The 24th of July began as an unremarkable day off. Newton and a group of friends had flown to Sydney in a small Cessna to watch a football match. When it was over, they returned to the airport for the short flight home to Newcastle. But the weather had turned. A severe storm had moved in. Rain hammered the tarmac. Visibility was poor. Signage around the aircraft was inadequate. In that darkness and confusion, a sequence of events began that could not be undone. 2 passengers had not yet boarded when the pilot, believing everyone was ready, began to taxi. One of them reached the right side of the aircraft, and the pilot stopped. Then Newton was spotted moving along the left side, making his way toward the nose, trying to reach the door on the other side. His friend, Frank Darcy, already on board, later recalled the moment. He couldn't get aboard and must have been trying to get around to the door on the other side. But an airplane is not like a motor car. You can't just walk around to the other side. The pilot shouted a warning. He moved to shut down the engine. It was too late. The spinning propeller caught Newton at a 4-5-degree angle, cutting across the entire right side of his body, from his hip through his abdomen, up through his shoulder, and across his right eye. He lost his right arm. He lost the sight in his right eye. A large portion of his bowel was removed, and he lost half his liver. Darcy rushed to him on the tarmac, pressing down on the wounds with his bare hands until help arrived. Doctors gave Newton a 40 to 50% chance of survival. For several days, he lay in a coma. For 8 weeks, he remained in intensive care. Newton later recalled the moment he understood how truly serious it was. Things weren't looking too good for me. I knew that from the priest walking around my hospital bed. When Newton finally emerged, letters arrived from across the tour: Nicholas, Sevy, Norman, Floyd. Newton later reflected, "I got a huge lift from all of them." Jack Nicklaus wrote, "So did Sevy, who I loved. They were all bloody good." Craig Stadler came to the hospital in person. When he walked into Newton's room and saw his friend, he broke down completely. Newton remembered it with characteristic warmth. He was very emotional. He's not the hard-nosed character you see on the course, but that's my sort of guy, really. The rehabilitation that followed was long and brutal. Newton had lost his right arm, his right eye, and with them, the depth perception that every golfer depends upon. Most people assumed his relationship with the game was finished. Newton had other ideas. He remembered watching a fellow tour player, Alan Miller, practicing with only his left hand. That memory became his starting point. He picked up a 7-iron, teed up a ball, a task far harder than it sounds, with one hand and no depth perception, and began to swing. Left hand, right-handed stance. Over and over again, through months of quiet, stubborn repetition. Slowly, impossibly, it came together. Jack Newton eventually played to a 12 handicap with one arm and one eye. Same Jack Newton, different golf swing, completely unbroken. Newton could have walked away from golf entirely. No one would have blamed him. Instead, he walked toward it. He became a television commentator, spending 23 years as a fixture on Channel 7 Inches Australia. His trademark bow tie became as recognizable as his voice, sharp, honest, and never short of an opinion. The same fearlessness that had defined his playing career translated perfectly into the commentary box. He also turned to golf course design, lending his knowledge and instinct to courses across the country. But the work that mattered most to Newton had begun years before the accident. Back in Cessnock, his coal mining hometown, he had noticed a group of young kids trying to learn the game. He put up some of his own money, bought a few trophies, and organized a small local tournament. 25 children showed up on the first day. That idea grew steadily, and in 1986, just 3 years after the accident, Newton formally established the Jack Newton Junior Golf Foundation. Over the decades that followed, the foundation raised millions of dollars for junior golf development and diabetes research across Australia, running tournaments, school programs, and elite training camps. The foundation's annual fundraising event became legendary in Australian sporting circles, with professional golfers and celebrities turning up each year in outlandish costumes, a tradition Newton himself enthusiastically encouraged. Pro golfer Greg Chalmers said it best, "Every journey starts somewhere. Mine was in golf tournaments under the Jack Newton Junior Golf Foundation." In 2007, the Australian government awarded Newton the Medal of the Order of Australia. 9 years later, he was inducted into the Sport Australia Hall of Fame. In 2020, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. His son Clint spoke publicly about what that meant for a man who had already survived so much. Alzheimer's has been thrust upon him, but he's up for the fight. He still wants to be the best he can be for Mom and his grandchildren. On the 14th of April, 2022, Jack Newton passed away at the age of 72. He was survived by his wife Jackie, his daughter Christy, herself a professional golfer, his son Clint, and 6 grandchildren. Gavin Kirkman, chief executive of the PGA of Australia, captured what Newton had meant to the sport. He was as tough off the course as he was on it. Yet underlying everything was his deep passion for golf and the positive impact it could have on people's lives, particularly young people. Jack Newton never won a major championship. He lost one by inches on a rain-soaked Sunday in Scotland. He lost another to one of the greatest players who ever lived on the most famous course in America. And then he lost his playing career in seconds on a dark runway at 33 years old. But what he built afterward with one arm, one eye, and the same stubborn refusal to surrender that had carried him from a coal mining town in New South Wales to the grandest stages in golf was a legacy no accident could ever take away. His own words say it best, "Once I got my tail up, I wasn't afraid of anybody."